G'day everyone, my name is Connor and I'll be presenting on the assertion that environmental conflict inevitably includes one group of people acting in a way that impacts negatively on another group. I will be using several examples throughout the presentation to demonstrate poignant topics that relate to this assertion. I hope you will enjoy the presentation. Environmental conflict can be understood as the mobilization of individuals or groups in response to perceived environmental threats with detrimental social impact. As such, environmental conflict is inextricably linked to the notion of one group of people acting in a way that negatively impacts on another group. Environmental conflict has a history as long as humankind itself and encompasses a broad range of issues. These issues can range from conflict over water supply between agricultural and urban settlements, to dumping of PCBs near to African American neighbourhoods, to the threatening of the Great Barrier Reef by the construction of a coal mine. Nearly all environmental conflicts can be directly linked to the industrial economy. Examples of this is the expansion of extractive industries such as mines, industrial pollution, large-scale agriculture, and waste management. The extension of Mount Thorley Warkworth coal mine close to the village of Bulga in the Hunter Valley is a local example of this. Conflict in the Bulga case centred around the health of the township's community, local biodiversity and water quality, after a proposal that Rio Tinto would mine within 2.6 kilometres of the village. Numerous parties became involved in this conflict, including the Environmental Defender's Office, the Land and Environment Court, and Bulga residents. After numerous court hearings and government reviews, the Independent Planning Commission awarded the mine approval for the extension. The operation currently continues to mine in 2023 and within 3 kilometres of the village of Bulga. The power of a government-backed multinational industrial corporation is quite simple to see here. Environmental conflict can also come about as a result of militaristic effort. Novaya Zemlya is an archipelago that has been at the site for over 130 nuclear tests since the 1950s. This includes the detonation of the most powerful nuclear weapon ever created, the Tsar Bomba. Immediately before testing began, 300 indigenous Nanette peoples were forcibly removed from the islands. It is also not known if this constituted the entire indigenous population of the archipelago. Following nuclear testing, the landscape of the archipelago has fundamentally changed. This 2-kilometre long lake is the result of a landslide caused by an underground testing in 1973. Novaya Zemlya is still under military control 80 years later, with portions, particularly Zone B, being highly irradiated. Conflict between Nanette peoples and their representatives with the Russian government continue to flare. Protesters have been incarcerated and pro-Nanette rights journalists have been violently attacked. Urban development and tourism can also drive environmental conflict. The Little Andaman Development Project, a plan to develop a tourist complex on the small island of Little Andaman, is a great example of this. Proposed by an Indian government think tank in 2019, the project would clear roughly 240 square kilometres of untouched rainforest and disrupt indigenous communities. The indigenous Onge people have lived on the island for roughly 26,000 years in isolation and currently reside within a tribal reserve on the east of the island. As part of the development plan, 131 square kilometres of clearing would take place on the Onge tribal reserve, destroying an extremely important piece of land for preserving a rare socio-ecological historical complex. Encouragingly, whilst only in the early planning phase, the project has drawn large amounts of criticism from media, academia, local people, and environmental defenders. It is hoped that Little Andaman can forgo environmental and cultural conflict by defending against the implementation of this development plan. There are, however, more nuanced instances of environmental conflict, which at first do not appear to be directly related to industrial practices. Environmental conflict can certainly arise out of biodiversity conservation and tourism. However, conservation has been used as a front for other practices. One example is the eviction of the San people from the Central Kalahari Game Reserve in Botswana. In 1961, the reserve was allocated to the San, intended to preserve their culture and lifestyle. However, since the 1980s, the Botswanan government has attempted to force the majority of the San out of the reserve, claiming that they are severely affecting the reserve's biodiversity. In 2002, the Botswanan government prevented hunting and access to drinking water by smashing boarheads in the reserve and violently attacking those attempting to hunt. It appears, however, that rather than the protection of biodiversity, the government have removed the San from the reserve to allow for diamond mining. After decades of denying the intention to allow mining in the reserve, in 2011 the government approved the Garghu diamond mine worth an estimated $4 billion. And as for the San, despite international courts deeming the eviction and abuse of human rights, they are still denied a return to the Central Kalahari Game Reserve. Following the examples I have given and the headlines all of us read, you may be able to recognise various shared themes to environmental conflict cases. The group acting in a way to negatively impact another group is usually much more powerful, and the group impacted is often part of a minority, be it their ethnicity, social standing, or monetary backing. Environmental conflict does not have to be enduring, however. At the centre of the solution to environmental conflict are effective environmental defenders and environmental managers. Environmental defenders can be defined as anyone defending the rights of the environment when those rights are being threatened. Sadly, environmental conflict has seen an increasing number of environmental defenders being killed during the 21st century. As tensions concerning environmental conflict continue to rise, it is imperative that defenders are respected and heard. Interaction between defenders and decision makers is imperative in the protection of the environment. As alluded to, and as others have likely explored in this week's presentations, it is also the role of the environmental manager in environmental conflict situations to lead groups out of conflict. Community consultation, risk and impacts assessments, as well as compassion are all integral to the practice of a good environmental manager. The cases I've presented have shown that environmental conflict does inevitably include one group of people acting in a way that impacts negatively on another group. I know I covered a diverse range of cases in exploring environmental conflict, but I hope you all learnt something new. I look forward to reading your responses to my questions on the forums this week. Cheers.